I'm Danielle, 22 years old, and I just graduated with a biochemistry degree from Northwestern. My parents never approved of my choices, yet they still threw me an extravagant graduation party. Strange, considering they called me a worthless leech just last week. As I watched bubbles rise in the expensive champagne, I caught my father slipping a white powder into my glass when he thought no one was looking. My heart stopped. My own father was trying to poison me. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from in the comments below. Hit that like and subscribe button as I share how I survived my parents' betrayal and found a strength I never knew I had. To understand why my parents would want to harm me, you need to know about our family. The Harrises were far from a typical loving household. My father, Joseph Harris, built Harris Pharmaceuticals from a small research lab into a multi-billion-dollar powerhouse. His reputation for ruthless business tactics was legendary. Competitors would mysteriously lose funding or face unexpected regulatory setbacks. Yet publicly, he maintained the image of a philanthropist and devoted family man. My mother, Eleanor, came from old money. Her family had been in pharmaceutical development for generations before she married my father and merged their companies. She was obsessed with appearances and the Harris legacy. Our house was often featured in architectural magazines, and she hosted charity galas that were the talk of Chicago society. But behind closed doors, she was cold, calculating, and endlessly critical of me. Then there was my perfect sister, Sophia, 3 years older, with straight-A grades, captain of the debate team, and later a Harvard Business School graduate with honors. She joined the family company without hesitation and quickly became the heir apparent. Our parents never missed her tennis matches or piano recitals. Her trophies and awards filled every corner of our home. When she spoke at dinner, they listened attentively. My experience was drastically different. Despite being a straight-A student myself, my achievements were met with indifference. "That's what we expect from a Harris," my father would mutter without looking up from his newspaper. When I won the state science fair in 10th grade, my mother merely remarked that my hair looked messy in the photos. They attended my events only when skipping them would have seemed suspicious. From childhood, my future had been mapped out for me. I was to study pharmaceutical sciences, join the family business, and eventually run the research division while Sophia handled the business side. My protests were ignored. When I developed an interest in environmental science, particularly how pharmaceutical waste impacts ecosystems, my father dismissed it as tree-hugger nonsense. During my junior year of high school, I applied to Northwestern specifically for their environmental science program. The confrontation that followed was explosive. My father threatened to cut me off financially, while my mother cried about family duty and tradition. I stood my ground, arguing that I could still make a difference without following their exact path. After weeks of silent treatment, they relented, but with conditions. They would fund my education only if I minored in biochemistry and worked summer internships at their company. College brought partial freedom, but the tension grew each year. Every holiday was filled with passive-aggressive comments about my phase and how I'd eventually come to my senses. The pressure intensified during my junior year when they sent me job descriptions for positions in their research department. When I secured an internship with an environmental nonprofit instead, they threatened to stop paying my tuition. I took out loans for my final year rather than give in. What they didn't know was that my maternal grandmother, Eleanor's mother, had left me a significant inheritance in a trust that would become accessible when I turned 23 or graduated college, whichever came later. Grandma Lillian had been the only family member who supported my independence. A brilliant chemist herself, she had been forced to work in her husband's shadow. Before she passed when I was 16, she made me promise to follow my own path. My parents discovered the inheritance 3 months before graduation, when their attorney accidentally mentioned it during a family business meeting. Sophia later told me our father had turned white with rage. The trust was ironclad, managed by independent trustees, and would give me complete financial independence, approximately $12 million that would have gone to my parents if I had never graduated or if I died before receiving it. The months leading up to graduation were eerily calm. My parents stopped their usual barrage of texts and calls pressuring me about job interviews at their company. Instead, they suddenly took an interest in my graduation plans. My mother called to say they wanted to throw me a proper celebration befitting a Harris. Their sudden change in behavior should have been my first warning. Graduation morning dawned bright and clear, a perfect May day in Chicago. I stood in front of my apartment mirror adjusting my cap, a mix of pride and anxiety swirling inside me. After 4 years of hard work maintaining a 3.9 GPA while deliberately steering away from my family's legacy, I had done it. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Car service will pick you up at 9:30. Do not be late." I met my parents outside the auditorium. My father was checking emails on his phone, while my mother scrutinized my appearance. "Could you not have done something more with your hair? The photographer will be taking family portraits later." No congratulations, no pride, just criticism. Sophia stood slightly apart, offering me a small, sympathetic smile. "Danielle," my best friend Taylor's voice cut through the tension. She rushed over in her own graduation gown with our other close friend Zoe right behind her. They had been my lifeline throughout college, the family I had chosen for myself. "We made it!" Taylor hugged me tightly, whispering, "Your parents still look like they smell something bad whenever they see you." "Some things never change," I whispered back. As my friends chatted excitedly about the ceremony and our plans to share an apartment after graduation, I noticed my parents step aside for what looked like an intense conversation. I couldn't hear most of it, but a few of my father's words drifted over. "We need to solve this problem today before it gets out of hand." My mother nodded grimly, then caught me watching. Her face instantly shifted into a polished, practiced smile. "Darling, we should find our seats. The ceremony will be starting soon." The graduation itself passed in a blur of speeches, names being called, and the satisfying weight of the diploma in my hand. When Danielle Elizabeth Harris, summa cum laude, echoed through the auditorium, I heard Taylor and Zoe cheering wildly. My parents applauded politely, their expressions unreadable. After the ceremony, the car service whisked us to the Peninsula, Chicago, where my parents had rented the entire rooftop terrace for my graduation celebration. I was stunned by the extravagance. Ice sculptures, champagne fountains, gourmet catering stations, and even a small orchestra playing softly in the corner. Fresh flowers covered every surface, and a professional photographer circulating among the early guests. "Quite the production your parents have put on," commented Dr. Lewis, approaching me with a glass of water. They had been my lifeline throughout college, the family I had chosen for myself. "We made it!" Taylor hugged me tightly, whispering, "Your parents still look like they smell something bad whenever they see you." "Some things never change," I whispered back. As my friends chatted excitedly about the ceremony and our plans to share an apartment after graduation, I noticed my parents step aside for what looked like an intense conversation. I couldn't hear most of it, but a few of my father's words drifted over. "We need to solve this problem today before it gets out of hand." My mother nodded grimly, then caught me watching. Her face instantly shifted into a polished, practiced smile. "Darling, we should find our seats. The ceremony will be starting soon." The graduation itself passed in a blur of speeches, names being called, and the satisfying weight of the diploma in my hand. When Danielle Elizabeth Harris, summa cum laude, echoed through the auditorium, I heard Taylor and Zoe cheering wildly. My parents applauded politely, their expressions unreadable. After the ceremony, the car service whisked us to the Peninsula, Chicago, where my parents had rented the entire rooftop terrace for my graduation celebration. I was stunned by the extravagance. Ice sculptures, champagne fountains, gourmet catering stations, and even a small orchestra playing softly in the corner. Fresh flowers covered every surface, and a professional photographer circulated among the early guests. "Quite the production your parents have put on," commented Dr. Lewis, approaching me with a glass of water. He had been my father's research partner decades ago, before leaving to teach at Northwestern. Over the years, he had become something of a mentor to me, one of the few links to my family's world that I actually valued. "Congratulations on your impressive achievement, Danielle." "Thank you. It's a bit much, isn't it? Not really their style, at least not for me." I scanned the growing crowd. Actually, I'm surprised by the guest list. Half these people I barely know. Dr. Lewis followed my gaze to where my father stood speaking with two men in expensive suits. Business associates. And over there with your mother, that's Gerald Thorne, your family's attorney. He lowered his voice. Things have been tense at the company lately. Rumors of irregularities in some clinical trials. Your father's been in closed-door meetings for weeks. My stomach tightened. What kind of irregularities? He shook his head. Nothing concrete, but be careful, Danielle. Your parents seem... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Particularly invested in keeping the Harris legacy intact right now. As the party reached full swing, I noticed something unsettling. My parents were watching me constantly, not with pride or even disappointment, but with a calculating intensity that made my skin crawl. Whenever I moved to a new conversation group, one of them would casually reposition themselves to keep me within sight. Sophia sidled up beside me as I grabbed an hors d'oeuvre. "Something weird is going on," she murmured. "Dad asked me 3 times if I'd mentioned your plans after graduation, and Mom keeps checking her watch like she's waiting for something." Before I could respond, my father clinked his glass, signaling for attention. "In 15 minutes, we'll have a special champagne toast for the graduate," he announced, his businessman's smile firmly in place. "Everyone, make sure you have a glass for the occasion." I watched as waiters began preparing flutes on silver trays. My father beckoned to the head waiter, pointing out a specific bottle of champagne with a gold label. "That one," he heard me say, "for the family only." With 15 minutes until the toast, I excused myself to use the restroom. The main facilities had a line, so I slipped down a service corridor toward the employee restroom I'd noticed earlier. As I approached, I heard angry whispers coming from around the corner. "Are you absolutely certain this is necessary?" My mother's voice was tense, higher than usual. "Do you want to lose everything we've built?" My father hissed back. "The FDA investigation is gaining momentum. If they find those test results, we're finished. The trust gives her enough money to be completely independent. What if she decides to play environmental crusader and exposes the river contamination from the West facility? She's always been self-righteous enough to do it." "Keep your voice down," my mother whispered harshly. "Someone could hear us." My blood turned to ice as I pressed myself against the wall, barely breathing. They were planning to poison me, my own parents. The realization was so monstrous that my mind initially rejected it, but the biochemist in me processed my father's words clinically, just enough to make her sick, a non-lethal dose of something that would mimic food poisoning but would require hospitalization. I slipped back down the corridor before they could discover me, my hands shaking so badly I could barely check my makeup in the main bathroom mirror. I needed to appear normal, to think clearly. Years of surviving my parents' emotional manipulation had taught me how to compartmentalize, but this was beyond anything I could have imagined. Back at the party, I observed with new eyes as waiters arranged champagne flutes on a special tray. My father approached, inspecting the glasses carefully, before selecting one and setting it slightly apart from the rest. The gold-labeled bottle was opened, and the bartender began filling the glasses. My father hovered nearby, ensuring he knew exactly which glass was which. I made my way to Taylor and Zoe, forcing my voice steady through sheer will. "I need you to do something for me. No questions asked," I whispered. Taylor immediately nodded, always loyal. "Record the toast on your phone. Get my father in the frame as much as possible, especially when he hands out the champagne." "Is everything okay?" Zoe asked, eyes filled with concern. "Just a precaution," I replied, forcing a smile. "Family drama, as usual." The minutes ticked by with excruciating slowness. My biochemistry training kicked in as I considered what my father might use. It would need to be something difficult to detect, something that could plausibly occur naturally or appear as food poisoning. Perhaps a compound from their own research facilities, one not yet included in standard toxicology screens. I would need to recognize the symptoms quickly if his plan worked. Nausea and vomiting would likely be the first signs, followed by abdominal pain, dizziness, or respiratory distress, depending on the toxin. If I could identify it fast enough, I could tell medical personnel exactly what to test for. As my father called everyone together for the toast, I realized with crystal clarity I needed evidence. If I simply refused the champagne, they would try again another way. I needed proof, something undeniable that couldn't be explained away. The moment of the toast approached with a surreal stillness. Waiters distributed champagne to the general guests, while my father personally handled the glasses from the special bottle. "The family should have the finest champagne for this special occasion," he announced jovially to nearby guests. He handed glasses to my mother, then to Sophia, and finally extended one specifically to me, his eyes meeting mine with a smile that never reached them. I watched in slow motion as he presented the glass. With absolute certainty, I noticed the faintly cloudy quality at the bottom, where a powder hadn't fully dissolved. My father's large signet ring glinted as he held the stem, practically forcing the glass into my hand. "To Danielle," he said loudly, raising his own glass. "May your future be everything you deserve." The double meaning wasn't lost on me. I accepted the poisoned champagne, careful not to let it touch my lips as the guests took their first sips. "Before we drink," my mother interjected smoothly, "Joseph, why don't you say a few words about our daughter on this special day?" My father cleared his throat, shifting into his public speaking persona. "Danielle has always been determined," he began, carefully selecting words that sounded complimentary to outsiders but carried years of disapproval only I could hear. "While she has chosen an unconventional path, today we celebrate her academic achievement." As he continued his passive-aggressive speech, my mind raced. Taylor was recording as promised, her phone discreetly capturing everything. I needed to act before the toast concluded. The champagne in my hand might as well have been a live grenade. "And to Sophia," my father added suddenly, deviating from the traditional toast to the graduate, "who has shown what a true Harris can accomplish in the business world, the perfect example of family loyalty." Sophia smiled awkwardly, clearly caught off guard by being included in what should have been my moment. And in that instant, I made my decision. "Speaking of my amazing sister," I said brightly, stepping forward, "I wouldn't be here without her support." I turned to Sophia, raising my glass. "She deserves a proper toast too." In fact, I held out my champagne flute toward her. "This special reserve champagne father selected is too good not to share. Take mine, sis. I insist." Before anyone could react, I had pressed my untouched glass into Sophia's hand and smoothly taken her already partially drunk one. My father's face froze in a mask of horror he couldn't publicly display, while my mother's knuckles went white around her glass. "To family," I declared, raising Sophia's safe champagne while locking eyes with my father. Confusion flickered across Sophia's face, but social instinct took over. She smiled, lifted my glass, and echoed, "To family," before drinking deeply from the poisoned flute. I sipped from her original glass, never breaking eye contact with my father. His face had gone ashen, a thin sheen of sweat forming on his forehead as realization struck. My mother glanced between Sophia and him, her polished smile tightening at the edges. The moment passed, guests applauded, conversations resumed, and the orchestra struck up again. I moved through the crowd, making small talk while keeping Sophia in my peripheral vision. Guilt and fear battled within me. I hadn't had time to think of another solution, but I had just let my sister drink poison meant for me. The dose was supposed to be non-lethal according to what I'd overheard, but what if my father lied? What if Sophia reacted badly to whatever he used? 34 minutes after the toast, it happened. I was speaking with one of my professors when I heard a gasp from across the room. Sophia had been chatting with one of the firm's junior associates when she suddenly pressed her hand to her forehead, swaying slightly. "I feel strange," I heard her say, her voice slurring. "Really dizzy. Suddenly." I pushed through the crowd just as Sophia's knees buckled. The associate caught her awkwardly as she slumped forward. "Help," she called. "Something's wrong." My parents rushed over, genuine panic in their eyes now that their golden child was the one in danger. My father reached her first, cradling her head as she began to mumble incoherently. Her skin had turned grayish, and beads of sweat gathered on her forehead. "Call an ambulance!" my mother shrieked, all composure gone. Dr. Lewis appeared at my side, his medical training kicking in as he checked Sophia's pulse. "Her heart rate is elevated and irregular," he reported, loosening her collar. What was she doing before this happened? She just had champagne at the toast. She seemed fine, then suddenly... My father's eyes snapped at mine, realization and fury mixing with fear. I stared back, unflinching. "The ambulance is on its way," someone announced, 5 minutes out. I kneeled beside Sophia, taking her hand. "Stay with them," I told my parents, firmly. "I'll go downstairs to direct the paramedics." They nodded distractedly, all attention on Sophia, who had begun to tremble slightly. In the privacy of the elevator, I pulled out my phone and called Taylor. "Meet me in the lobby right now," I instructed. "Bring your phone with the recording. It's an emergency." Taylor and Zoe were waiting when the elevator doors opened. "Sophia collapsed," I explained quickly, as we moved toward the entrance. "I need you to give a copy of the toast recording to the paramedics and tell them I suspect poisoning, then send me a backup." "Poisoning?" Zoe repeated, horrified. "What the hell is going on, Danielle?" "I'll explain everything later. Please, just trust me." The wail of ambulance sirens grew louder as they neared. When the paramedics arrived, I stepped forward to meet them. My sister collapsed upstairs. I said quickly, "Symptoms include dizziness, disorientation, irregular heartbeat, and tremors. I have reason to believe she ingested a toxic substance in her champagne." The paramedic looked sharply at me. "You suspect poisoning? Based on what?" "I'm a biochemistry graduate. The symptoms appeared suddenly about 30 minutes after consumption. Before I could finish, my parents burst out of the elevator, with Dr. Lewis supporting a semi-conscious Sophia between them. The paramedics rushed forward with a gurney, their training taking over, as they quickly assessed her condition. "Please help her," my mother sobbed, mascara streaming down her face. "She just collapsed." "BP 90/60 and dropping, pulse 120 and irregular." As they loaded her into the ambulance, my father turned to me, his voice low and dangerous. "What did you do?" "Nothing," I replied calmly. "She drank from my glass. Remember the special champagne you selected just for me?" His face twisted with rage and fear. "You switched the glasses deliberately. You knew—" "Knew what, father? That you put something in my drink? Why would I think that? Unless you did." "She needs family with her," a paramedic interrupted. "One person can ride along." "I'll go," my mother insisted, already climbing in. "We'll follow in the car," my father said, grabbing my arm painfully. "All of us." The ride to Northwestern Memorial Hospital was tense and silent. My father drove while I sat in the back seat. Taylor and Zoe had promised to meet me there. My phone buzzed with a text from Taylor. "Video sent to your email. Shows you clearly switching glasses after your father handed you one. What do I tell the police when they arrive?" Police. Of course there would be police if poisoning was suspected. I texted back quickly. "Tell them everything you saw. Show them the video." In the emergency room, chaos reigned. Sophia had been rushed into a treatment area, while my mother wailed dramatically to anyone who would listen about her precious daughter collapsing for no reason. I approached the nurse's station directly. "I need to speak with my sister's doctor immediately. I have reason to believe she ingested a toxin, and I may know what it is." The nurse looked skeptical until I added, "I'm a biochemistry graduate specializing in pharmaceutical compounds. Please, time might be critical." Minutes later, I was speaking with Dr. Patel, the emergency physician treating Sophia. Your sister is showing symptoms consistent with anticholinergic poisoning: elevated heart rate, confusion, dilated pupils, dry mouth. We're treating her symptoms while running toxicology screens. You need to specifically test for cyclopentylate derivatives. My father works with modified versions at Harris Pharmaceuticals. They're testing a new class of compounds that wouldn't show up on standard tox screens. Dr. Patel's eyebrows rose. That's a very specific suggestion. Why do you suspect this particular compound? I took a deep breath. Because I believe my father intentionally added it to my champagne glass, but my sister drank from it instead. Her professional expression didn't change, but she reached for the phone. I need to contact the police. Within an hour, the emergency room had become a crime scene. 2 detectives interviewed staff while a uniformed officer stood outside Sophia's treatment room. My parents had been separated for questioning, my mother loudly protesting the absurd accusations, while my father demanded his attorney. I sat in a small consultation room with Detective Rivera, a serious woman with kind eyes that belied her nonsense demeanor. "Walk me through what happened again," she requested, taking detailed notes. I recounted everything, from overhearing the conversation to seeing my father place powder in my champagne to the split-second decision to switch glasses with Sophia. "I have biochemistry training," I explained. "I recognized the symptoms when they started. I never thought he'd use something potentially lethal, but I couldn't be sure." "And why would your parents want to poison you?" she asked carefully. "Money. Control. My grandmother left me a trust worth approximately $12 million that activates next week. If I died before then, it would revert to my parents. They also recently discovered their pharmaceutical company is under FDA investigation, and they believe I might have information that could harm them." Detective Rivera's expression remained neutral, but she underlined something in her notes. "That's a serious accusation." "I know," I said quietly. "I have the video my friend took of the toast. You can clearly see my father giving me a specific glass and my decision to switch with Sophia. You can also interview Dr. Lewis, who knows about the tension within the family and the company." A knock on the door interrupted us. Dr. Patel entered, holding a tablet. "We have preliminary toxicology results. We found elevated levels of a modified anticholinergic compound, similar to, but not identical, to cyclopentylate. It appears to be a lab-created drug that causes symptoms mimicking severe food poisoning, but with additional cardiovascular effects." Detective Rivera looked between us. "In English, please." "It's a lab-created drug that causes symptoms mimicking severe food poisoning, but with additional cardiovascular effects. Exactly the kind of compound Harris Pharmaceuticals has been developing. Only someone with access to their research facilities would have it." "Will she be all right?" I asked Dr. Patel, anxiously. "We're administering physostigmine as an antidote. Her condition is serious but stable. If we hadn't identified the compound quickly, there could have been permanent heart damage." I closed my eyes briefly, relief washing over me. "Thank you." When I opened them, I found Detective Rivera studying me carefully. "You realize that, by your own admission, you knowingly allowed your sister to drink what you suspected was poisoned champagne." My stomach dropped. I didn't know what else to do in that moment. I needed evidence. I thought it was just enough to make someone sick, not life-threatening. My voice trembled slightly. I made a terrible decision, and I'll have to live with that. Before she could respond, the door burst open. My father stormed in, followed by a flustered officer and a sharp-looking man in an expensive suit. "This is outrageous!" my father shouted. "My daughter is clearly mentally unstable and jealous of her sister's success. She's been making wild accusations about our family for years." "Mr. Harris, I must ask you to step outside," Detective Rivera said firmly, standing up. "Joseph Harris, do not say another word," the suited man instructed, placing a hand on my father's arm. "I'm Gerald Thorne, the Harris family attorney. My client has no comment at this time." "Your client is not under arrest, yet." Detective Rivera emphasized the last word. "But I suggest he cooperate fully. We have video evidence of the champagne toast and preliminary toxicology reports confirming a research-grade pharmaceutical compound in Sophia Harris's system. My father's face went through a rapid series of emotions before settling into cold fury. Danielle has always been troubled, he said, his voice suddenly calm and reasonable. She was jealous of her sister, resentful of our expectations. She's threatened before to destroy our family business out of spite. That's not true, I protested. We indulged her environmental science whims despite her responsibilities to the family company. We even threw this expensive graduation party to show our support. And how does she repay us? By creating this elaborate drama and allowing her own sister to become ill? Gerald Thorne placed a business card on the table. Detective, we'll cooperate fully with your investigation, but any further questions should come through me. The Harris family is prominent in this community, and we expect discretion. After they left, Detective Rivera picked up the card with 2 fingers, as if it might be contaminated. Interesting family you have, Miss Harris. You have no idea, I replied wearily. A commotion in the hallway drew our attention. Dr. Lewis had arrived and was arguing with the officer outside Sophia's room. I'm her family physician. I need to review her treatment. Detective Rivera and I stepped out as Dr. Lewis spotted me. Danielle, thank God. What happened? They're saying Joseph tried to poison you? Before I could answer, Dr. Patel emerged from Sophia's room. She's asking for you, Danielle. She's still groggy but lucid. Entering the dimly lit hospital room, I felt a wave of guilt seeing Sophia connected to monitors, an IV in her arm. Her normally perfect appearance was disheveled, her skin still pale and unhealthy. Her eyes fluttered open as I approached. Hey, I said softly, taking her hand. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck, she replied, her voice raspy. They told me. Is it true? Did Dad really try to poison you? I nodded slowly, tears filling my eyes. I'm so sorry you drank it instead. I just reacted. I didn't think. Why? She whispered, confusion and pain clouding her eyes. Why would he do that? The trust from Grandma Lillian, the FDA investigation, they were afraid I'd expose contamination at the West facility. Understanding dawned in Sophia's eyes. The sealed reports, the ones they've been keeping on the secure server? She squeezed my hand weakly. And Equint, I saw them last month but didn't understand what I was looking at. Heavy metal readings, disposal records, they've been dumping research waste directly into the watershed for years. A soft knock interrupted us, as Detective Rivera entered with another plainclothes officer. Miss Harris, we've just received additional information I thought you should know. The FBI has been investigating Harris Pharmaceuticals for the past 6 months for fraud, environmental violations, and falsification of clinical trial data. I stared at her. The FBI? Yes, your parents were already under surveillance. When we contacted them about the poisoning, they revealed substantial evidence of criminal activity. Search warrants have just been executed at your family's offices and home. Sophia's monitors beeped as her heart rate spiked. Oh my God, she whispered. I signed off on some of those documents. Joseph said they were routine regulatory filings. We'll need to speak with you about that later, Miss Harris. The other officer said to Sophia, but for now, focus on your recovery. As they left, Sophia began to cry quietly. I trusted them completely. I defended them whenever you complained about how they treated you. And all this time, I held her hand tightly. You didn't know. They manipulated both of us, just in different ways. What happens now? She asked, fear and uncertainty replacing her usual confidence. Now, we tell the truth, I replied simply. All of it. The story broke in the Chicago Tribune 2 days later. Pharmaceutical CEO and wife arrested for attempted murder of daughter. Smaller headlines followed. FBI uncovers massive fraud and environmental crimes at Harris Pharmaceuticals. Our family name, once synonymous with success and philanthropy, became overnight shorthand for corporate greed and betrayal. I moved temporarily into Taylor and Zoe's apartment, unable to face returning to my own place where reporters lingered.
Sophia remained in the hospital for 4 more days before being released into the care of our Aunt Patricia, my mother's estranged sister, who flew in from Seattle upon hearing the news. I always knew Eleanor was capable of terrible things, but I never imagined this. I should have stayed in touch with you girls. Aunt Patricia told me over coffee in the hospital cafeteria. The investigation expanded rapidly. With search warrants in hand, the FBI discovered a trove of incriminating documents at both the Harris offices and our family home. Emails detailed systematic falsification of safety data for 3 major drugs currently on the market. Environmental testing revealed years of illegal toxic waste disposal, contaminating groundwater in communities near the West facility. Detective Rivera kept me updated on the poisoning case. The lab confirmed the compound was an experimental anticholinergic from your father's private research facility. He signed it out personally 3 days before your graduation. We also found notes in his home office detailing dosage calculations. I worked closely with the authorities, providing everything I knew about the company's operations and my parents' behavior. Days blurred together in a haze of police interviews, meetings with prosecutors, and checking on Sophia's recovery. A week after the incident, I met with Special Agent Donovan from the FBI at his request. He spread photographs across the table between us. Do you recognize this location? I studied the images of what appeared to be a storage unit. Inside were boxes of documents, several laptop computers, and most disturbingly, vials of various compounds carefully arranged in temperature-controlled containers. No, I've never seen this place, I replied, watching his reaction. It's a storage unit rented under your name, said Donovan. Opened 6 months ago with what appears to be a forged signature? My blood ran cold. They were planning this for months, setting me up in case their original plan failed. It appears so, Agent Donovan agreed. We found evidence on your father's computer of multiple contingency plans. The poisoning attempt was actually Plan C. Plans A and B involved more elaborate setups that would have implicated you in corporate espionage and data theft. As the case built, more family secrets began to emerge. Financial records revealed that my parents had been siphoning company funds into offshore accounts for years. Former employees came forward with stories of being fired after raising safety concerns. 3 families filed lawsuits claiming their loved ones had died from side effects that Harris Pharmaceuticals had deliberately concealed during clinical trials. Through it all, Sophia and I grew closer than we had ever been. The golden child facade crumbled as she processed her own sense of betrayal and manipulation. I was their puppet, she admitted during one of our long talks in her recovery room. Everything I did was to please them.
My whole identity was built around being the perfect Harris daughter. You were also their shield, I pointed out gently. As long as you were the successful, obedient one, they could dismiss me as the problematic child, rather than question their own behavior. 2 weeks after the incident, we received word that our parents were being held without bail after the judge deemed them flight risks due to their substantial overseas assets. Their preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following week. On the morning of the hearing, Sophia and I met for breakfast at a quiet cafe far from the courthouse. She still moved carefully, her body not fully recovered from the poison. "Are you ready for this?" I asked, stirring my untouched coffee. "No," she admitted, "but we need to be there. I need to look them in the eyes." The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters shouting questions as we approached. Inside, the hearing room fell silent as we entered, all eyes turning toward the poisoned daughter and the intended target. Our parents sat at the defense table, both impeccably dressed despite weeks in detention. My mother's eyes filled with tears when she saw Sophia, but my father stared straight ahead, refusing to acknowledge either of us. The evidence presented was damning. The prosecution displayed the video of the toast, clearly showing my father handing me the specific glass and my subsequent switch with Sophia. They presented toxicology reports. The compound trace matched exactly with samples from my father's private lab. Financial records established the motive: my trust fund, which would have reverted to them upon my death. Most shocking to the spectators was a recorded phone call my father had made from detention to a business associate.
instructing him to clean up the situation with those river samples, and remarking that Danielle was always the problem child, never understanding family loyalty. When the judge ruled there was sufficient evidence to proceed to trial on all counts, including attempted murder, my mother collapsed into theatrical sobs. My father remained stone-faced, his clenched jaw betraying his fury. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed again. Sophia surprised me by taking my hand and addressing them directly. My sister and I are cooperating fully with authorities. We ask for privacy during this difficult time as we come to terms with our parents' betrayal. Thank you. As we pushed through the crowd toward our waiting car, a reporter shouted, "Did you know your sister was switching the glasses? Were you part of the plan?" Sophia stopped cold, turning back with unexpected fire. My sister saved my life. Our parents tried to poison her, and when she realized it, she had seconds to decide what to do. She's carried unnecessary guilt for my suffering, but the only people responsible are Joseph and Eleanor Harris. They were willing to kill their own daughter for money and to cover up their crimes. That's the story you should be telling. In the following days, more family members, many we had barely known, reached out. Cousins, distant aunts, even my father's brother, who had been ostracized decades ago for whistleblowing on an earlier pharmaceutical scandal. It seemed our family tree was rooted in control, manipulation, and retribution against anyone who challenged the Harris way. Sophia and I began the painful process of separating ourselves legally and financially from our parents. We hired our own attorney, a kind yet razor-sharp woman named Vivian Santos, who helped us navigate the complexities of our situation. "Your grandmother's trust is secure," she assured me during one meeting. "The trustees have accelerated the transfer given the extraordinary circumstances. As for Harris Pharmaceuticals, that's more complicated." "I don't want anything to do with it," I stated firmly. Sophia nodded. "Neither do I, but we have a responsibility to the employees who weren't involved in the crimes and to the communities affected by the contamination. There's also the matter of your parents' personal assets. Much will likely be seized or directed toward victim restitution, but there will still be substantial holdings that would typically pass to you as their only children." I looked at Sophia, seeing my own conflict mirrored in her eyes. "We need time to think about that," I said finally. As summer progressed, the case against our parents strengthened. 3 former Harris Pharmaceutical executives agreed to testify in exchange for reduced sentences. Environmental testing confirmed widespread contamination directly tied to improperly disposed research chemicals. The estimated cleanup costs exceeded $100 million. In August, 2 months after the graduation party incident, Sophia and I returned to our childhood home with FBI agents to identify additional documents and evidence. Walking through the silent, imposing rooms felt surreal. Everything looked exactly as it always had: perfect, cold, and sterile. In my father's study, agents carefully cataloged the contents of his safe. "Miss Harris," one called, holding out a small leather journal. "Do you recognize this?" I took it carefully. The journal was old, its pages yellowed. Inside, I found my grandmother Lillian's handwriting, a record of her own discoveries and concerns about Harris Pharmaceuticals from decades earlier. The final entry, dated shortly before her death, read, "I have arranged for Danielle's financial independence. She alone has the conscience and strength to break the cycle of this family's poison." Tears filled my eyes when I showed it to Sophia. "She knew," I whispered. "She was trying to protect me all along." "And you protected me," Sophia replied, squeezing my hand. "That's what real family does." 6 months after that fateful graduation party, I stood on the porch of my grandmother's lake house, watching the November sun shimmer across the water. The property had been part of my inheritance, a peaceful retreat 2 hours outside Chicago that I had visited often as a child. Now it was my home, at least temporarily, as I figured out my next steps. The trust had been officially transferred to me 3 weeks after the incident, the trustees unanimously agreeing to expedite the process given the extraordinary circumstances. The first thing I did was establish a separate fund for Sophia's ongoing medical care and therapy. Though she had physically recovered, the psychological wounds ran deep. "Hot chocolate delivery," called the voice behind me. Sophia emerged from the house carrying 2 steaming mugs, bundled in one of my oversized sweaters. She had moved in a month ago after selling her downtown condo, too full of memories of family dinners and parental approval. Perfect timing, I smiled, accepting the mug gratefully. I was just thinking about how much has changed. Everything, she agreed, settling into the Adirondack chair beside mine. Remember when we used to come here with Grandma Lillian? She'd let us stay up late watching the stars, telling us stories about women scientists who changed the world. I remember Mother hating those trips. She was convinced Grandma was filling our heads with dangerous independence. She was right about that, at least, Sophia said with a wry smile. Then her expression turned thoughtful. The prosecution called this morning. They're offering a plea deal. My hands tightened around the warm mug. What kind of deal? 20 years for father on the attempted murder and environmental charges, 15 for mother if she testifies about the corporate fraud. She paused. They want to know if we object. I stared out to the lake, watching an eagle circle lazily above the water. Do you object? I don't know, she admitted. Part of me wants them to face a full trial, to have everything exposed, but another part just wants it to be over. I understand, I said softly. We sat in comfortable silence, a new dynamic for sisters who had spent most of their lives as strangers sharing the same family space.
The past months had forged a genuine bond between us, built on shared trauma, but growing into true friendship and trust. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Lewis. Environmental job interview went well. They were impressed by a research proposal on pharmaceutical waste remediation. Call me for details. I smiled, showing the message to Sophia. After the dust had settled, I had begun reaching out to environmental science firms specializing in industrial contamination cleanup. My background in biochemistry, combined with my environmental focus, made me uniquely qualified to work on pharmaceutical pollution. It felt right, using the Harris knowledge to heal some of the damage my family had caused. Sophia had her own healing journey. She had resigned from Harris Pharmaceuticals immediately after being released from the hospital and spent months helping authorities understand the company's operations and identify which executives had been complicit in the crimes. Now she was considering law school, inspired by the prosecutors and victim advocates she had met through our case. The house is being seized next week, she mentioned, referring to our childhood home. They wanted to know if there's anything personal we want to retrieve first. I shook my head. Nothing I need there. What about you? I already took the photo albums, the real ones, not the staged family portraits Mother kept in the living room, the candid ones Nora used to take. Nora had been our housekeeper for 15 years, the closest thing to a loving maternal figure we had ever known. Have you heard from Nora? I asked. She's in Florida with her daughter, Sophia said with a small smile. She sent me a care package last week with homemade cookies and a note saying she always knew we'd break free eventually. The criminal proceedings continued their slow progression through the justice system. Our parents maintained their innocence publicly, while their attorneys negotiated frantically behind the scenes. The evidence was overwhelming, with new details emerging regularly as former employees came forward. Most painfully, we discovered through corporate emails that our parents had known about the environmental contamination for over a decade. Communities downstream from the factory experienced elevated cancer rates and birth defects, information my parents had systematically suppressed through confidential settlements and manipulated studies. I channeled my anger into action, establishing a foundation with part of my inheritance dedicated to providing healthcare and environmental testing for affected communities. It couldn't undo the damage, but it was a start toward making amends for the Harris legacy. The media gradually lost interest in our story as newer scandals emerged, allowing us precious anonymity to rebuild our lives. I began volunteering with a water quality monitoring program at the lake, finding healing in the simple act of protecting something beautiful. On a cold January morning, exactly 7 months after the graduation party,
Sophia and I sat in the courtroom as our parents accepted their plea deals. They looked smaller somehow, their designer clothes replaced by muted business attire, their imperious demeanor diminished by months in detention. My mother wept quietly as the judge detailed her crimes, while my father remained stoic, his eyes fixed on some middle distance. Neither of them looked at us, their daughters sitting in the gallery. When asked if they wanted to make statements before sentencing, my mother declined through her tears. My father stood, and for a brief moment I thought he might express remorse. Instead, he spoke about his lifetime of contributions to medical science and how he had always done what was necessary to protect the family business. He described himself as a victim of changing regulatory standards and expressed hope that history would judge him more fairly than this court. Not once did he acknowledge the communities his company had poisoned, the patients harmed by falsified drug safety data, or his attempt to murder his own daughter. In his mind, he remained justified, a man who had merely done what was necessary. As the bailiff led them away to begin their sentences, I felt a complex wave of emotions: sadness for what our family could have been, anger at their continued refusal to take responsibility, but predominantly an overwhelming sense of relief. It was finally over. Outside the courthouse, away from the small cluster of reporters, Dr. Lewis waited with Taylor and Zoe, my chosen family who had supported me unfailingly throughout the ordeal. "How are you feeling?" Taylor asked, hugging me tightly. "Free," I replied simply, "like I can finally breathe." In the months that followed, Sophia and I continued our separate but intertwined healing journeys. We sold most of our parents' personal assets, directing the proceeds toward a victim compensation fund. I accepted the position with the environmental remediation firm, focusing specifically on the cleanup of the Harris West facility site. Sophia began her first semester of law school, determined to specialize in environmental law and corporate accountability. We kept the lake house as our shared refuge, a place that held happy memories untainted by our parents' influence. Sometimes we would sit on the dock, talking late into the night, processing our complicated grief for the family we had lost and the one we had never really had. "Do you think you'll ever forgive them?" Sophia asked me one evening as we watched the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and crimson. I considered the question carefully. I don't know if forgiveness is the right word. I've accepted what happened and who they are. I've released the anger because carrying it was only hurting me. But forgiveness feels like it requires repentance from them, and I don't think they're capable of that. She nodded thoughtfully. I keep thinking about nature versus nurture. Were they born this way, or did something make them like this? And either way, what does that mean for us? It means we have choices, I said firmly. Their blood runs in our veins, but their values don't have to run in our hearts. We get to decide what kind of people we become. A year after the graduation party, I stood at a podium addressing a conference on pharmaceutical environmental impact. As I discussed innovative approaches to remediation, I caught sight of Sophia in the audience, proudly recording my speech, on her phone. Beside her sat Dr. Lewis, Taylor, Zoe, and a growing circle of friends and colleagues who had become our support system. The journey had been painful beyond imagination, but standing there, I realized I had found something I had never experienced in the Harris household: genuine belonging, not based on compliance, achievement, or genetic connection, but on mutual respect, shared values, and authentic care. My parents had seen me as a problem to solve, a threat to eliminate. They had tried to poison not just my body, but my spirit, my independence, my very sense of self. In choosing to fight back and refusing to become either victim or villain in their narrative, I had discovered my own strength and purpose. The inheritance my grandmother left me was valuable, But her true gift had been believing in my capacity to break the toxic cycle. That faith had saved my life, and now it was shaping my future. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect yourself from toxic family relationships? What helped you find the strength to move forward? I hope my story reminds you that blood relation does not entitle anyone to harm you, and that sometimes the most loving families are the ones we create for ourselves. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of survival and renewal. And remember, the most powerful antidote to poison is truth. Thank you for listening to my journey.